Hey guys, today we're going to talk about reviewing and revising our papers. Let's jump into it. So, your first draft should never be your final draft. We've talked about how your final draft is required to be different than your rough draft. So, even if it wasn't, your final draft should always be different from your first draft. It's very important that we go back, review our paper, maybe get some feedback on it from ourselves and others, and then we implement that feedback, which is where the revision process comes in, okay? Reviewing and revising are two of the most important steps in the writing process. It's so vital that we go back and look at what we've written to catch some mistakes, okay? When we do this, when we review our paper, it leads to better thinking as we challenge our ideas and weigh the evidence we've included, and we scrutinize our logic, okay? It's important for us to question ourselves, okay? So when we go back and we read our papers, you should be thinking, okay, are my ideas valid? Is what I'm saying logical, and will it make sense to somebody else? Looking at the evidence you've included to support your argument. This is a chance for you to look at it and say, is this evidence supporting my claim strong enough? Is this saying what I am trying to use it to say? Will my reader understand this, right? All of these things are things you should be asking yourself when you review your paper. It also leads to you just being a better writer in general, right? As we reflect on our writing practices, we learn to identify our strengths and we learn to identify our weaknesses. So as we continue to go back and review each essay, you will probably realize that there are some repeated mistakes that maybe you didn't realize you had an issue with. And then when we do that, you can say, okay, it's very clear to me that I struggle with run-on sentences. Let me put a little more effort into learning how to fix that. Maybe you struggle with using a comma correctly, and every time you go back and you review a new paper, you realize, okay, I'm still struggling with that, so you can learn ways to overcome your weaknesses. You're not able to overcome your weaknesses if you don't know what your weaknesses are, right? So it's important that you look for your weaknesses when reviewing, but also your strengths, right? It's important for you to know what your strong suits are when writing. My Alexa alarm is going off. Please hold. Alexa, stop. Sorry. Okay, back to it. When we review our paper, our argument becomes clearer, more developed according to our thesis statements, and less defined by unnatural, awkward angles. Really what that just says is when we go back and review, we're able to make our paper a better paper. We can make sure that what we're arguing is clearer. Is my paper following the structure my thesis statement lays out? And less defined by unnatural, awkward angles. Maybe you'll go back and you read your paper and you'll say, oh, the way I said that kind of sounds a little off, maybe a little chunky. Maybe I'm not transitioning between my paragraphs as well as I thought I was. And then you can fix it. But again, you won't know that there's something you need to fix unless you actually go back, reread, and review your paper. There are three main steps to the reviewing and revision process, okay? So first is self-review, then you're going to get a peer review, and then implementing the feedback you get in a revision process. So let's start with self-review. I spy with my little eye. What am I looking at, okay? Proofreading is extremely important. I cannot say that enough, okay? This is where we fix spelling errors, grammar errors, where we enhance clarity and coherence, strengthen our argument. I cannot stress this enough, and I know I've said this in previous lectures, but please read your essays out loud. Your ears will catch mistakes that your eyes don't, okay? I know that sometimes it can be awkward to read your paper out loud because you feel like you're talking to yourself. I don't know. I'm not uncomfortable with it, but I know some people are. If that's the case, and you don't want to read it out loud yourself, use an immersive reader program. So whether you use Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Pages, any kind of word processor will have an immersive reader program. It's basically a button that you click and the computer will read your essay back to you, okay? Do I think this is as helpful as reading your essay out loud with your own voice? No. But if you're not going to do that, please do this. Again, your ears will catch mistakes that your eyes don't. So it's important for you to audibly hear what you've written. Here's a self-review checklist. These are some questions you should be asking yourself when you go back and proofread your paper. Do I address the essay prompt and meet all requirements? I'm going to stop there. This is like the foundation of everything. This is your first priority. Is what I've written addressing what the prompt asks of me, okay? If you submit a paper that is the most beautifully written paper I have ever read, but it doesn't answer the question the prompt is asking you, you're not going to get a passing grade. It's not going to be a successful paper. You have to make sure that you are directly addressing the prompt and meeting all the requirements. Am I meeting the word count? Am I following MLA format? All of those basic requirements that your prompt lays out, please first and foremost make sure that you are meeting all of those things. Secondly, you want to ask yourself, is my thesis clear? Is what I'm going to be arguing in the bulk of my paper obvious, or is it clear based on the last sentence in my introduction? If you don't have a clear thesis statement, again, it's going to be real difficult for you to have a successful paper. Is my thesis too obvious? So this is something that people don't really think about too often. You are making an argument, okay? You want to make sure that the argument you're making isn't too obvious and unimportant, okay? So if you are arguing murder is bad, obviously murder is bad, right? No one is encouraging people to go down the street killing people. That's just not what people are doing, right? So if you are writing a paper on that, there's no point. Make sure your thesis statement is too obvious. You want to make sure that what you're saying hasn't been overstated. It's not like a cliche. It's not such an obvious argument that there's no point in reading the paper. I hope that makes sense. Is my thesis clear? Is my thesis too obvious? Okay. Have I included enough evidence in my body paragraph? Have I included enough evidence to support what I'm saying? Do my body paragraphs actually address my thesis? Remember, in your thesis statement, you are making a claim and you are also including the three main points you're going to be talking about in your paper. So we want to make sure that our body paragraphs actually address what the thesis is saying, in addition to following the structure of main points that your thesis statement lays out. Remember, your first main point in your thesis statement, that's what you should talk about first in your essay. Then you can move on to your second main point, then your third main point, but it should follow the same structure as listed in your thesis statement. Does my conclusion restate the thesis and summarize my main points, right? Those are the two big parts of your conclusion. Is my position on my essay topic clear? Sometimes what happens is students turn in an essay that isn't really actually an argumentative essay. It's more of a report where it's very neutral. There isn't a stance. Like, you're not taking a stance. Be careful of that, okay? It's easy to kind of fall into this neutral territory, but in these argumentative essays, you should be making a clear, strong argument about something, okay? So, like, if you're writing about the death penalty, your paper shouldn't be weighing the pros and cons of the death penalty. You can talk about the pros and cons, but it should be clear to me that you are either pro-death penalty or anti-death penalty, okay? So is my position clear? Is there a point to my essay, or is my reader left asking, so what? Remember, in your conclusion, the last part of the conclusion is making sure that your reader understands why your argument is relevant, okay? You don't want them left thinking, okay, so what? I read their paper, who cares? You need to make sure to make it clear to your reader why what you're saying is relevant, why it's important. Does my essay follow MLA format? Again, a standard thing. Is my essay following MLA format? Have I used spell check, right? Is there a lot of typos here? Please keep an eye out for the typos. And have I read my essay out loud? So keep this checklist handy when you are going back and proofreading your essay. Make sure you check all of these things off. And if you have all of these things, you're pretty likely to have a successful paper. All right, let's talk about peer review. So you've done your self-review, you've gone over it yourself. Now you want to get some feedback from your peers. This is intended to give you helpful feedback to improve your essay. When we write, we already know all about what it is that we're trying to write about. And sometimes this can make it difficult for us to be as clear as we need to be for others to understand. So we've done research, like we've made our own argument. In our head, everything makes sense. But sometimes what we are trying to say doesn't necessarily make it from our head to our paper the way we intended it to. And sometimes we're not able to see that. And this is where peer review comes in. We get a second set of eyes, and it helps give us some clarity, right? This is where we find out whether or not what we're actually trying to say is being articulated properly. Like, is my argument coming through? Hopefully peer review, somebody who reads your paper, can tell you yes or no. Peer review makes you a better writer through critical analysis of others' works, okay? It teaches you how to think about your own writing in relation to the work of others, okay? So when you're doing peer review, you are going to read papers that are better than yours, and that should be a good thing. Don't ever read somebody else's paper and think to yourself, oh my God, mine sucks, this is so much better, and feel bad about yourself. You want to read papers that are better than yours. When we do this, we can steal some stuff from the other essay, right? Good writing can serve as a model for your own. We talked about week 1. The best way to be a good writer is to be a good reader. So when we're peer reviewing other people's essays, we can use what other people are doing well to help better our own papers. On the flip side, bad writing can serve as a model for what not to do. You are going to read papers in this class that are not as good as yours. This isn't intended for you to say, oh, I'm so great, I'm perfect, and this essay sucks. I'm so glad I'm better at writing than my classmate. That is not the purpose, right? But you can read a paper that is not as good as yours and realize what they're doing wrong and try to avoid those things in your own paper, right? So good writing can serve as a model for your own, and bad writing can serve as a model for you for what not to do in your paper. Here are a couple of do's and don'ts for peer review. So don't rush, okay? When you are reading somebody else's paper, it's really important to take your time to actually read it and understand what it is that your classmate's trying to say. You would want your classmates to do that for you, so in turn, you need to do it for them as well. Leave biases behind. We all do not have the same point of views, okay? It's impossible for everyone to see eye to eye on everything. So you are probably going to read papers where somebody is claiming or making an argument about something that you don't agree with. That is not important in this class. So it's very important for you to leave your biases at the door. Your opinion of the content is not important. What you're looking for is whether or not your classmate is making a clear argument, if what they are trying to argue is coming through. Whether or not you agree with that, not important here. So leave your biases behind. Annotate as you read. I will show you in just a minute how to annotate on Canvas when you are peer reviewing for this class. But in future classes, if you're peer reviewing like an actual physical essay, it's important for you to annotate as you read. Ask yourself questions, give compliments and suggestions. Make sure the essay is addressing the prompt and meeting all the requirements. So same thing that you want to make sure of when you're proofreading your own paper, you want to look for these same things in your classmate's paper. Make sure, are they actually addressing the prompt and meeting all of those minimum requirements? Also, don't sweat the small stuff. Like if, let's say if the essay you're reading, if the student consistently misuses commas, there's no need for you to like circle 27 commas in the paper, like those small little details. That's not important. You could maybe mark it 1 or 2 times and let them know, hey, I'm seeing this throughout your essay. Keep an eye out for it. But don't go marking up the entire paper for one little teeny tiny issue. Like if that's not important. You're looking at the big picture stuff, right? Is their argument coming through? Are they utilizing the tools that we learned in this unit that I'm looking for in the essay when I'm grading? Super important. Give constructive criticism. Both parts of that statement are important. Constructive and criticism. It's your job to be critical as a peer reviewer, but you should be trying to be helpful, not mean. So, it's not helpful if all you say to your partner is, Yeah, great job. I loved everything. This is really great. And all you're giving them is positive feedback. The essay is not perfect. You're never going to read a student essay that's perfect. So there should always be something for you to critique. Okay. So giving 100% positive feedback, well, that's nice. It's not helpful in the long run. On the flip side, just critiquing and only giving negative comments, also not super helpful. Like, if someone is just criticizing you and critiquing you over and over and over again, it's so easy to kind of shut down and not want to listen to what they have to say or like actually take their advice. So you want to avoid that, right? So it's important to give both. Tell them what they're doing right, but also point out what they could improve on, what they could do better, okay? Only give feedback on what you understand. You are not the professor, nor does anybody expect you to be, okay? So as a student, you have limited knowledge, and that's okay. That's why you're in college, is to expand on your knowledge, right? But this is a beginning writer's class, so you are not expected to know the ins and outs of essay writing. So don't feel like you have to comment on every single aspect of the writing process, okay? Only give feedback on what you know and feel strongly about. Like, if you know that you personally struggle with run-on sentences and you can't really figure out how to get out of making that mistake so many times, you probably shouldn't be commenting on anyone else's run-on sentences, because that's clearly not something that you personally understand. So again, only give feedback on what you know and understand. You're not the professor. You don't know anything. You're not expected to. Just give the help that you're able to give, essentially. All right, last but not least, we are moving on to revision. So this is where you fix your issues from both self-review and peer review, okay? So you've looked at your essay yourself, you've marked some things you want to fix, you've had your peer review partners look at your essay and they've given you some feedback. Now it's up to you to pick and choose the feedback that you want to actually implement into your paper, okay? First and foremost, fix the no-brainers, okay? So those things that we talked about that like are just like the foundation, the bare minimum requirements. Like, if you have an unclear thesis, whether you saw that in your self-review or one of your peers told you, hey, I'm not really sure what your thesis statement is, fix that right away. If you are lacking evidence, fix that right away. If you have unclear sentences or sections, like if things that you're saying just aren't making sense, fix that. Then get to the formatting issues, right? So like grammar, spelling, MLA format, like those things are super important, but make sure you hit all of the big picture stuff too. And this also includes making sure that you are answering the prompt. I'm going to say it again. You're going to get tired of hearing me saying it all semester, but if you don't address the prompt, no matter how good your essay is, you will not pass. You won't get a passing grade on that paper, okay? So revision process is taking the things that you've marked in your paper that you peer reviewed. It's taking the feedback that I've given you and your peers have given you and implementing it into your final draft.